This is your crash course to make your short film take off.
We agonized over every aspect of it because it had to be clear and concise.
Bobby Pontillas and Andrew Chesworth were already working animators with credit on Disney films like Frozen, Zootopia, Big Hero 6 and Moana when they set out to tell a story close to their heart. The result? One Small Step, a stunning short film about a girl chasing her dream of becoming an astronaut and the dad who supports her every step of the way.
It's probably got the most clarity of message of any project I've worked on. We wanted it to be a celebration and a tribute to those who support us in our dreams.
Made by a small team at Taiko Studios, One Small Step has reached millions, earned an Oscar nomination, and made a lot of people cry, including me. Proving that clear visuals, a strong structure, and real emotion are the key to crafting an unforgettable story.
There's no self-made people. Everyone's a product of the people that brought them into the world and came before them and supported them.
So, what makes a great short film actually work? How can setup and payoff elevate your story? Why are the most personal stories often the most universal? And how can you fit all of this in just 7 minutes?
The 7-minute thing, 8-minute thing, it's not only a numbers thing, it's kind of how can you force yourself to be super efficient about that storytelling bit?
If you're an animator dreaming of telling your stories, this is the masterclass for you. And if you haven't seen One Small Step, well, it's on YouTube. Go watch it and bring some tissues. Now, let's get into it. Hi, Bobby and Andrew. Welcome to Write for Animation. I'm so excited about this interview.
Thank you for having us today.
Would like to turn this interview into a mini masterclass on how to write a short film. And so I absolutely love One Small Step, and we'll give a proper introduction to all the amazing work you've done beyond this short film. But this could be a great example about something that could be very emotional, very creative, very artsy, but also that relates to the audience and understands all the principles of storytelling. So let's start with the inspiration behind the short film. How did the project come to be?
We had an idea for the short that we pitched to Disney early on, and the idea was that someone, as a little kid, found their inspiration very early, and maybe some of us can relate to this, whether it's animation or whether it's business or finance or going to the moon or being an astronaut. And then the idea was dedicating their whole life to making that dream happen, from the early stages of just kind of how you grew up, that you do in your life, from elementary school to junior high and high school and all that kind of stuff, is kind of geared towards that dream that you had. We kind of had that as animators, as artists, and so we can very much relate to that. And so that was the initial thing early on, because Andrew, especially myself, and anyone that you kind of meet in the animation industry, you talk to them and they're like, I love to draw when I was a kid, or I love this movie, I love that movie, and I always wanted to get into that area of work, and it didn't even seem like work. Andrew got hooked onto animation early on, right?
Yeah. It's like Dumbo, Pinocchio. I remember seeing those VHS tapes on TV, and to compare it to our short, my Luna aha moment watching the rocket take off was probably watching those Disney films and thinking, I want to do that someday. Us landing on the moon is like us stepping into Disney for the first time. That was the analogy Bobby and I always use when we first finished the short.
To kind of pad that a little bit out too, it's just kind of when you work many years and kind of many hours to kind of make your dream come true, you realize kind of that you're not the only one, that it wasn't just you that kind of got there. It's because of the support that everyone supported you along the way, whether it's mentors or family members or colleagues or anything like that. If and when you finally get into your dream job, we kind of talked about just kind of only thing you can remember is the people that kind of supported you along the ways. That's a lot of what the short was about. She worked hard to make her dream come true, but it wasn't for the support of her family and the world around her.
There's no self-made people. I mean, everyone's a product of the people that brought them into the world and came before them and supported them. And when you're young, you can decide every step I take is going to be a step toward my dream. But when you get there, you look back and think all the steps that were taken before me by my parents, by my teachers, by my supporters, they had this whole journey that allowed me to go the rest of the way. And that's the perspective that we had, and that's the perspective change we wanted our character to have.
I love that. And I think it connects to two things. One is that you were able to transcend the experience. Sometimes the first instinct for, let's say, somebody that wants to create a short film about something like this is like, okay, my character is going to be a kid that loves to draw. She goes into art school and then she gets rejected. And you were able to extract it to an analogy that's universal, but also makes it even more interesting, I think, and with the specificity of her situation, location, background, and the goal as well.
When the Pixar film Soul came out, I remember Pete Docter talking about how his inspiration was similar, like creating animation in films, but he didn't find that to be particularly cinematic. And music is something everyone can relate to, and there's a performance and kinetic element to it that looks better on film. And you can tell the same kind of story with a musician in a way that relates to more people than necessarily being an animator. It made me think of our journey with our film. Like, applying to Disney to be a Disney animator feels like shooting for the stars. There's a feeling of abstraction there that maybe invites more people in the audience in and is more exciting to look at when it pays off at the end.
This is from Chloe. She's part of our Writer Animation Academy. And she's asking, how do you know if a story idea you have better fits a short or a feature-length film?
That's a great question, because I think nowadays, with so many exciting TV shows and long-form storytelling being put out into the world, feature films almost feel like the new short. The 90 minutes is the new 6 minutes. It's like standalone story, get in, get out. I think when something's a short, obviously it takes a lot less time and money to make than a feature, so it can be more personal. If you've got something that you want to say about your own life experience that's going to cost a lot less resources to produce, maybe it's a good candidate for a short. Like, I've got this character, she's got this goal, and this is what I want to say about it. A short can be a good vehicle for a more poetic statement, and a feature has to accommodate a lot more needs. It has to hold somebody's interest for an hour and a half. It has to have more expansive backstory around all the characters and world building, and there has to be a more pressing commercial component to it. It would be difficult for us to make One Small Step exactly the way we made it without those outside forces acting on us. If we were asking for $100 million to do it as a feature, it becomes a different story. You're the director, yes, but it's not just your film. And I think a short can be more of a direct window into your brain or the brain of the small team that you've put together to produce it. Basically, the smaller it is, the more personal it can be. And so shorts are an opportunity to be very personal and very specific.
I think it wasn't like we have an idea, is it going to be a short or a feature? I think we're going to make a short. So automatically with those parameters, that kind of like dictates the storytelling.
I always think about this idea of the more personal something is, the more universal it will be. That's what I felt watching that.
I was watching it again today before this interview, and I think one of those things where we were in a position where we're going to make a short film, we know those parameters, we wanted to make it span the cultural barrier. The simplicity of the storytelling, the universality of the storytelling, I think is what kind of drove the way that the short is now. It was with those very specific parameters, but they're very big parameters because it was a company that was an American and Chinese collaboration and partnership. So we knew that we had to be very specific, but also the themes had to be something that was universal, but also something that we can kind of relate to, so that if we're going to work on this for like a year and a half, 2 years, that it would ring true to us as filmmakers. And it was a small team, like over there in LA is probably like 6-7 people did the design and story and that kind of stuff. So it had to ring true to us as well.
We kind of covered the idea generation. Make something personal if you're starting out with your short film. Your short film is very poetic, but it's still a traditional story. And that's what we were trying to focus on, also because it's very hard to teach something that's experimental. To focus more on, the story structure, you have a clear protagonist, that she has a goal. I love to listen about Luna, the creation of Luna as a character, and what makes us care for her. We really care about her. We have empathy. What are some things that somebody that's starting out and sometimes you feel you're not connecting with the character?
We had drafts of the script and versions of the animatic where she did some things that were maybe a little bit bolder than the final character turned out. Like, I think we implied that maybe she went out to the club when she was in her late teens, early 20s, and coming home late, like she'd been out dancing, and dad's kind of like, well, you know, what are you doing? That's certainly elaborating on her character, but it's not supporting the story we're telling within 6 minutes, right? Which is mostly about the contrast between her and her dad in this finite amount of time. And we didn't want to start opening other boxes of like, what's her dating life like? Or what does she argue about with her friends? Like, we didn't want to go there because of the limited time of the short. So we had to kind of imply it with behavior, that the character had drive and she had intensity, and she could be irritated with her dad, but not in a way that would repel the audience. It's like minor irritations, like, I'm busy, I'm eating, I had a long day, don't get up in my face. But the dad is patient with her and loves her unconditionally. And I think seeing him express that love to her kind of gives the audience permission to say, oh, he's okay with this. This is normal. This is just their relationship. So the way the two characters relate to each other can influence how the audience feels about them too.
Yeah, 100%. I think the two things that we kind of latched onto early on, Pietro, is just kind of to get an audience to empathize with her. It wouldn't just be her in a vacuum. It's her relationship with dad, right? So the relationship thing was the most important thing, and that was key. And then the second thing was, remember, Ches, early on, we watched those master classes with Aaron Sorkin, and it's intention and obstacle. Her intention and her obstacle had to be very, very clear. Those are, I think, like the two things that we're kind of like honing in on, and the relationship stuff. There are versions where it just had it her going against her goal, and a lot of times we're like, why do we care about this character? But it clicked when we kind of delved into the relationship she had with her father.
And family is universal too. I mean, everyone's got a parent. Everyone who walks the earth has a parent. And so everyone has some way into that part of the story. It's something to consider, you know, when thinking about the universality of your film. Like, family is universal, like our closest friends are universal. If it's a short about an old man and a talking umbrella, it might not have the same universality. Like, you can make that work, but there's less people who have a talking umbrella than people who have a parent. I think the type of story you tell can influence the degree of universality it might have, but that's just something to consider, of like, what's something that everyone has. And it could be different for everybody, but everyone has it. Start from something that everyone can connect to. We're all born, we all have a parent figure, we all have friends, and we all eventually die, right? If you can work all those things into your story, you've got a wide spectrum of universality.
That's beautiful, because then you can combine that with the specificity of your background and circumstances, and so it will be unique but also speak to many people. I love also that you mentioned the relationship. I think I've heard this from Phil Lord. It's this idea, and I remember when starting out as a writer, you think, okay, this is all about learning the structures, hitting those points at the right time. Then you start like growing and think, no, it's not really the structure, it's the character, and then express that through structure. And I think it was Phil Lord saying, well, movies are not even about characters. They're really always about our relationship. It's this idea of, okay, it's not the character by themselves, it's the relationship with somebody else. And almost feels like a dual protagonist story, at least at the beginning. Of course, she has the main arc and everything, but I really feel for the dad as well. And I would like to learn a little bit about how do you balance who is your protagonist and the empathy also with the other person in the short.
I think in our case, the protagonist is the character who changes more. They both have an intention and they both have an obstacle. Dad's intention is to support his daughter no matter what. His obstacle is perhaps his financial means and his age and his health and the fact that he's raising her alone. So he has an intention and he has an obstacle, even though his arc might be a little bit more linear. Whereas she starts one way, she's got this very innocent, naive, linear view of the world, like, I'm just going to keep going until I hit my dream. But then she realizes maybe her grades aren't good enough, or she doesn't have the personal characteristics that she needs to overcome some of these obstacles. She's a little bit more stubborn and maybe like narrow-minded about some things. And then when life knocks her down, her perspective widens after she has time to reflect, and she becomes the kind of character she needs to be to eventually achieve that dream. That arc of like her perspective growing when life knocks her down, that's the change that she goes through. So because she has that change, like, that naturally makes her more of the protagonist. Maybe that's an oversimplification as well, but that's how we looked at it.
I don't think it is an oversimplification. I think it's like one of those things, Ches, where we felt that too, like coming up in our careers and trying to make our dreams come true. We kind of come across those barriers, and maybe sometimes we're just a little too foolhardy and too headstrong a little bit. And then life knocks us on our ass a little bit, and then how do we deal with that? Just kind of like dipping into the experiences that we kind of had felt before that made it genuine, pulling from genuine or actual experiences, life experiences, and trying to put it into the story, I think is what made it feel right,
Yeah. There was an element of research that helped us too. Researching astronauts both from the United States and also Russia and China. The common thread is like there's a personal characteristic you have to have, which is to be very kind of selfless and willing to put yourself in danger for others and stay level-headed in tense and dangerous situations. So the type of person you need to be an astronaut is something that our character was not at the beginning of the story. She was only thinking about herself, not in like an overly selfish way, but in a youthful way. Like, I'm studying, I know how this works, I know what to do. Why am I not there yet? And I think a lot of young people feel that frustration at some point in their life. And it's because the blinders haven't come off yet. You haven't seen the world around you quite as clearly yet. So you don't have those characteristics you need to really succeed in the way that opportunity then invites you in because you've changed for it.
We establish the care, we care about them, we understand their relationship, the intention, the obstacle. And then I would like to learn a little bit about the structure, because sometimes, especially new filmmakers, they try to reject that and think that those are formulas and things like that. I believe they're not. It's the way we experience the world. It's not Hollywood, it's not even Aristotle or Campbell or any of those books. If you had to explain, how the characters is expressed through a structure from the beginning, somebody that's approaching this for the first time, how would you define the three-act structure? How would you explain it to them?
In the context of our film, we have childhood and the birth of the dream, and then we have the struggle of growing up, and then we have the payoff and the maturity of the finale. The arc of the story kind of has the arc of a life in a way. I mean, there's like being young and innocent and then struggling as you mature and then becoming old and wise. And I think that feeling of like the arc of a life felt like something we could transpose onto our story. The trouble we had while crafting it, fitting it into 7 minutes, was we didn't want it to be a montage film. We didn't want it to be a film that was just constantly out of breath and jumping from one moment to the next. We knew we needed at least a few moments of real-time interaction between the characters so that you had a moment to feel like you lived with them and got to experience moments with them. And so the birthday party, the imaginary play with the cardboard spaceship, and then when we jump forward in time, coming home to dinner and realizing that she's been rejected by her college of her dreams. We needed like these moments that played out in like half a minute or a minute or more straight ahead increments so that we didn't feel like the film was just rushing out of breath to get us to the end of the story. And that was a balancing act because early versions of it did feel very montage heavy and you never felt like you got close enough to the characters. So the key to unlocking our story was kind of putting that initial structure on it, but then finding the moments that would bring us closest to those characters at those key points in their life. The discovery of the dream and then engaging with that love from a pure childhood play standpoint, then feeling the brunt of that rejection when you're a young adult. And then after she loses her dad, we have a few other long moments that play out in real time.
One of the main things that I realized in making the short film, watching it again, like we had our first image, last image, and kind of it mirroring each other. One of the things I remember us going through, Pietro, is just kind of like, okay, so we had a few versions of the screenplay we thought was solid enough to move forward. When we put it up on reels, it changes so much, especially for a pantomime short film where no one's saying anything. You have to see it play out on reels, and you have to see how the 1, 2, and 3 acts are kind of playing out, and it changes so much because you can kind of react to it. This part is too long, this part is too short. But I think we had a pretty solid outline screenplay, but it changed so much when you get into the visuals and once you see it play out in animatic form. I wanted to touch on that too, Pietro, because like that is very much like a form of like visual storytelling, like writing as well. Kind of like once you get kind of seeing how the shots kind of play together, it changed so much, and it continued to kind of evolve and change all the way up until the end. But I think there was a lot of value in just kind of seeing how the thing kind of played out. And I remember early on, like Ches saying, we have to put a cap on the time because otherwise it's going to like spiral out of control. And so he's like, 7 minutes, let's do hone in for 7 minutes. And it's like 7 minutes, that's way short, right? And at least we can aim for something that's kind of like short and concise. We can trim the kind of stuff that kind of felt unimportant, or we can be a little more efficient about these cuts. Let's do this, this, and this, and this. I think watching it now, it kind of pays off because like when you watch it, it just kind of feels so efficient. Storytelling wise, I think that's what we were kind of going for, being really lean about like the messages that we wanted to say, the relationship cues that we wanted to hit on every like scene. So that discipline of just kind of like the 7 minute thing, 8 minute thing, it's not only like a numbers thing, it's just kind of like, how can you force yourself to be super efficient about that storytelling bit? Say what you want to say in every scene and then get out. Next.
We benchmarked the runtime and the shot count for Paperman and Feast. Not to be like, this has 140 shots, so we're going to have 140 shots. But just to know that that's kind of the range, right? If you want to land around 6 minutes and have it be paced and feel similar to one of those shorts, that's the amount of information you have. Otherwise, you're going to start to go over, and that informs maybe what you can actually fit into your story.
We wanted it to be expressive, but also disciplined in that way.
Yeah. We had 4 drafts of the script, and before we had 4 drafts of the script, Bobby and Trent had a few different versions of the outline with different possible outcomes for the characters. I think at one point, the dad died in a car accident, and it was like more of a sudden, spontaneous shock. It's funny, like as you explore these things and you realize you've only got a few minutes to tell your story, you're like, is this a story about loss and going to space, or is it a story about a dad who dies in a car accident? You know what I mean? Like every idea in your story takes up so much more real estate when it's a short. Mm-hmm. And so we decided to pull back on the nature of his death. We kind of imply it with old age and frailty and related sickness, right? That can just happen passively, because the spectacle or the implication of dying in a car accident, it just kind of feels like that's what the short's about at that point. Yes. There's all these things that you kind of have to kind of test when you talk it through and read it aloud. And I remember when we were reading aloud those early versions, I just kept getting hung up on the car accident thing. Like, that's what the short's about now. It's about traffic safety. And so I think even before you get to the storyboarding stage, reading aloud your words in outline form and in script form, it gives you a sense of how long it takes to ingest that information. Even just yesterday, I was listening to Seinfeld talk about his writing process for his comedy, and he'll agonize for weeks on number of syllables. The way that the words enter your brain, there's a rhythm and a musicality to it, and he's always editing down and reframing the words so that they sound just right, to hit right and give you that laugh and give you that feeling of clarity of like, what I'm thinking about, what I'm thinking is funny, just penetrates right into your mind and you get it right away. And what makes him such a successful comedian, I think, applies to discipline in storytelling and in visual storytelling too.
I think that he's very good at sharing things that apply to filmmaking and screenwriting as well. His routine of writing, the way he tests the jokes, and even just how prolific he is, and with that,
he says there is no writer's block. It's just writing, just putting in writing and writing bad, and then eventually you refine it and make it better.
Yeah, speaking about your process, because I can see the short film and identify all the exact points of the classical structure. You have the inciting incident, first turning point, midpoint, the all is lost moment, second act break. Do you think in those terms, or is that just a byproduct of a good story? And also, did those terminology help you communicate with the team and understanding how to structure the short film, or was it more organically thinking about the character?
It was a little bit of both. We didn't necessarily come from the writing space at Taiko. We're animators and artists And then we decided to make this short film. But like once we sort of educated ourselves on kind of the first act structure or anything like writing in terms of like screenwriting or anything like that, we try to incorporate that into it, whether consciously or subconsciously, how like agonizing over every syllable. That's exactly what we did in terms of just kind of every second of every shot of every frame of the short. Because once it's a pantomime, if it's a pantomime short film, and especially if no one's talking, every single aspect has to be down to the lighting, how many, when you're editing, like too long, too short, too long, too short, you know, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Every design aspect, every animation aspect of it. And he said he would agonize over that. We agonize over like every aspect of it because it had to be clear and concise. We wanted it to be impactful, but like say it immediate. The kind of approach that he has on writing is especially the approach that we had on the filmmaking side of everything. Early on, we were new to the craft, especially, and maybe up-and-coming writers can kind of relate to that, but like, because we were animators, we were kind of well-versed in the storytelling aspect of things anyway, just on a different level. I mean, Andrew's an amazing, amazing filmmaker. He's also an animator. And so getting assigned a shot, what's the point of the shot? What do you want to say with the shot? How can you say what you want to say with a shot? And then get in and then get out. And how does that contribute to the whole film altogether? So we try to pull from our experience and strengths in that aspect of it. We had a lot to learn. That's why when you look at the film, I think like the storytelling of it is visually clear and concise.
Bobby and Shafu and I were all animators, and I think we all understood how much animation can really make or break the tone of your film. You can have a really strong animatic with really great timing and really great production design, but if your animation is silly or inauthentic or busy, you can break the intended feeling of that moment that you wrote. That performance aspect to it is really important to the payoff of the final product, I think, because you can have all the best planning in the world, but then if you cast the wrong actor or give the wrong performance, the story is not in good hands, or you might be telling the story in a way that you didn't intend to.
That's why I love writing for animation, because everybody is a writer, animators and story artists specifically. Sometimes they don't know it. They think that they cannot tell their own stories, and that's part of the mission of Write for Animation, as what we're doing right now, hopefully inspiring some of other artists and animators and to start telling their own stories, learning the basics, so that then from there they have this superpower even in the industry to be able to put together a team and show it to the world. I think it's fantastic, and it's an amazing community because of the collaboration.
And I also wanted to add to that, doing just the right animation for your short. It doesn't mean it has to be this elaborate feature quality, like razor sharp polish. Like that's where we came from, so that's where we preferred to put our value. Like we wanted more feature kind of polished performances in the short. But that being said, if you're working on a leaner budget, an example I love from recent memory is Blue Eye Samurai. It's a TV show that's all about the writing, all about the design. The animation is a little more budget compared to like a Disney feature. However, I think the animation supports the storytelling because it's extremely deliberate. They're not animating the characters in a way that they shouldn't be animated. They're not making superfluous extra choices that are not needed in the scene. It's a little more limited, polished, but it's extremely deliberate and intentional in execution. And that to me is a testament to the quality of communication that the writers had with the animation team, that the animators could still deliver such specific performances on a budget, supported the material and didn't distract from it.
Hey, we're about to get into one of my favorite ways of elevating any story, setup and payoff. But before we go on, I want to invite you to join our Write for Animation Academy. It's a creative community where you'll connect with other passionate storytellers who are all about improving their craft. We write together, learn together, and help each other thrive in this animation industry. When you join, you'll get instant access to our short film writing course, where you'll finish your own short film in just 4 weeks. If you're looking to boost your animation career, join us today at writeforanimation.com/academy. The link is down below. Now, let's get back to Bobby and Andrew.
Talking about this specificity, something I've noticed from the short film is the use of setup and payoff in the overall arc, but also in very tiny details here and there. Can you share some of those and how setup and payoff works with the audience?
I remember a funny bit was we were really big on callbacks. Remember, like Chaz,
I love a good callback.
We're like, this is callbacks to the short film. Everything that we set up on the first act, we try to call it back because it's only 7 minutes. And so like we knew that the audience was going to be familiar with certain things. And if we could show them that again, just to kind of a different light, then they would be like, there's a satisfaction of just being like, oh yeah. There is a great satisfaction in a great callback.
There's kind of like a feng shui to it where you see the characters sitting at that same table with that same camera setup. And whenever she's young or juvenile, she's on the right side of the table. And after the father's gone and she's become wise, she's on the left side of the table. And when he was alone at the table, we saw her envelope arrive. And then when she's alone at the table, the next envelope arrives. And we're trying to use every element of the visual storytelling that we've set up to help the audience just arrive directly at what we're trying to say. And I think an undisciplined short would have put the camera in different places all the time. And you're like, I know I'm in the same kitchen, but like, what are you trying to say to me right now? The more things you can limit changing from one scene to the next, the more the thing that's different will stand out and just penetrate into the mind of the audience.
There's a beauty in the simplicity that we try to chase after in every aspect of it, with the storytelling, with the shots, with the lighting, like everything about it. So even just kind of the way we compose the shot, we didn't move the camera a ton. There wasn't dynamic stuff. We staged it right in the middle, because it's a simple story, and I think that it kind of reflected itself in the cinematography. But definitely, Pietro, to your point of just kind of, this was an affecting moment that our characters had in the beginning. They're going through the same thing years later, but just under different circumstances. And even like Chesworth animated the first shot and the last shot. Those shots are little girl Luna looking up in wonder. Last shot is adult Luna looking up in wonder. And that is just kind of like where we wanted to go in terms of just like the tone of the film. And then just kind of like a full circle thing. We felt it in our lives, trying to put that on screen. Hopefully it would resonate.
Oh, it did. I think it's perfect. It's just amazing. And I see how you use that technique of setup and payoff to not only for the general satisfaction that it gives the audience as any callback. For example, the one where she's running at the beginning and she falls, and then we have the opposite later. First of all, I noticed that she's always like running uphill a little bit, and so even that it shows the struggle even in those tiny details, but also creates empathy later when she's helping somebody. As you said, like she's changing and growing as a person. Now it's not only about herself.
And there's a couple things going on in those two shots. Like the first time, we're always looking at her feet because we had this theme of like stepping towards your dream. But whenever we're in tight, it's kind of more like Luna's perspective, like all about me. So like the first time she's running and she falls, we're tight on her. And the second time she's running, we cut wider in a similar setup. We can see everybody. We see the person who falls and she sees and helps her up. So going wide on the second time somebody falls was part of that storytelling choice to kind of open up her perspective. Like when we're with her, we're not just tight.
Now let's talk about theme, because something very interesting is that theme in writing, I noticed that it doesn't need to be original. That needs to be truth. But at the same time, you mentioned Soul at the beginning. You're a movie that's about understanding that the dream is not necessarily what's going to make you happy. And I love that in this film, there's a pursuit of the dream, but at the same time, it's not really the relationship and understanding the father and everything that he did. That is the mark of her becoming an adult. I want to hear about what is your approach with theme. At what point do you bring like a specific message into the story? What is the message? Anything you want to share about your relationship with theme?
I think with this film, it's probably got the most clarity of message of any project I've worked on. We wanted it to be a celebration and a tribute to those who support us in our dreams. It made a lot of the decision making in the storytelling easier as a result, because we knew this is about learning to really see and appreciate the people who help us achieve our goals in life. So in that sense, like the theme, I thought was really helpful in the execution of the final film.
Maybe there's a darker side to that, like honed in, so focused on your dream, like 100%, that you kind of forget about the world around you. Maybe there might have been a little bit of that in Luna's flaw. She's kind of like full bore into her dream, and she's kind of neglecting her relationship with her dad, like toward the end. Sacrificing relationships because you're chasing after a dream. I mean, that's a byproduct of being obsessed with something. Before she knew it, it was too late. That isn't necessarily the brightest part of her personality. I think that we all can kind of experience that at some point.
It's truthful. I think even people who mean well and aren't defined by that personality trait are capable of that kind of unintentional neglect. It adds up a little bit more clearly in a really ambitious, determined character, but I think it's still a feeling that we can all relate to, like, oh, I should have spent more time with this person, or I should have appreciated them more. And it's dark because it's true.
I just want to share, as a father, I work really hard for my daughters, and at the same time, when I'm at work, I'm not spending time with them.
I feel that.
You know, that relationship, but I want them to know. And I believe, like, as an audience, I mean, just to give you as a mirror how I felt it, I believe that when she opens the boxes where you feel all that compression of mixed feelings. And the key, in my opinion, is that, as you mentioned, the father is okay. The father is supporting of her dream. And so you never feel like he understands exactly, completely, that this is something that will make her happy. The painful truth. We had an interview with Tom Moore from Cartoon Saloon, and he was seeing theme as, what is the painful truth that I want to share? I thought that was very interesting.
I agree. I think every story is more interesting when you confront a painful truth, but overcome it and see it through an optimistic lens. Succumbing to pessimism, I don't think, is useful for the audience ultimately. Like, I mean, it can be cathartic in a certain kind of story or a certain kind of character, but there has to be like a truthfulness and a utility in expressing that truth. Like, how is this gonna help you see the world differently in your own life as a result of experiencing this character's trauma or difficulty? I always liked how the dad, you know, because he's a single parent, because he's an immigrant, because he's a little bit older, you get the sense that he's experienced loss, he's experienced suffering, and he's overcome it because he's just that kind of person. He loves his daughter. That's all that matters. These traumas, these losses he's experienced, to him, that's just part of life. You accept it, you keep going. Even though we don't know much about his backstory other than his appearance and the details of their home, you can infer a lot based on just what you're seeing and how he's behaving.
It's the tip of the iceberg of the character.
Yes, it's the tip of the iceberg. Yep, that's right.
The beautiful thing about the dad was, maybe something we can all relate to as artists, is that, like, he didn't necessarily understand everything about his like dream. My mom was the same way. She's like, all right, you're gonna do this. I don't know anything about animation, but I'm gonna support you the whole way through. And it's kind of, for them, it's just kind of like a non-question. It's just kind of like, this is what my kid is passionate about. I want them to be happy and that kind of stuff. That sounds Pollyanna, but that's the way my mom was. I think that's the way our parents were. It's just
definitely
like,
my parents
don't necessarily know a lot about animation, and it sounds risky, but all right, go ahead and do it. You know what I mean? Like, and just make me proud.
It's a good thing we grew up at a time in the mid to late 90s, early 2000s. We came of age at a time when, fortunately, these movies were really good and they were making a lot of money and everyone was aware of them. I went to college the year that Finding Nemo came out, and it was like this amazing movie, made all the money, and it seemed like such a great career choice. And I think the circumstances of when I came of age certainly helped my parents think like, oh yeah, that seems great. It's a little different now. All the movies are losing money. It's a little bit scarier, but there's new ways to express yourself with animation that didn't exist 20 years ago.
Yeah. And more space for independent studios as well. I think that we'll see a lot more that. We have some questions from the audience, and I would like to start with Quinn. He's also part of the Right for Animation Academy. He asked, what is the most effective way to introduce a character in a short film without dialogue?
Show them doing something they love. Show them in like an appealing light, doing something they love, doing something they're great at or excited about, with a very clear intentionality. Our very first shot, she's like wearing her helmet, pretending to be an astronaut. She's a bright-eyed little kid, and she sees a rocket take off on TV, and she's just like, that I want that. Hooking an audience right away with the characters' like identity and intention, their drive. Like just don't waste any time, just get right to it.
There's a sense of positivity to that, like in the immediate. Positive dreams. I mean, like whether you have one or not, or you do, man, that's gonna hook somebody. Like a big dream.
And then we have one this is from Avery Kroll. She's the director of the short film we were working on together with Tony Beckroff. She asked, how did you choose the specific attribute of a parent-child relationship to focus on, and what was your process for finding it? And the second part is, how did you ensure the relationship was unique and relatable to a wide audience?
Try to dig into our personal experiences, a parent trying to support the dreams of their young kid that had a big dream, whether it was to get into the arts or be an astronaut or everything in between. I think a lot of us at Taiko early on were highly ambitious go-getters that had big dreams, and we were used to kind of telling those stories. We'd had big dreams our whole lives. That is certainly something that we can relate to. However, like we mentioned before, we knew that it wasn't only because we did it ourselves. We knew that it was because of the people that supported us along the way. My mom definitely supported myself along the way. Chesworth, his mom and dad are wonderful and supported him along the way, and mentors and teachers and all that kind of stuff. So organically, it was just the lives that we kind of lived. We worked our butts off to get where we were at Disney. We knew that we couldn't have gotten there without our support system. So that naturally kind of made its way into the storytelling aspect of it, of just Luna, this highly ambitious person. And when you work in these kind of like a Disney, you meet hundreds of highly ambitious people that are just kind of like, if every aspect of their lives are optimized to make their dreams come true.
It's like the Olympics of animation at Disney.
Yeah, 100%.
As far as like developing those characters, we all had a piece of ourselves or our family that we put into it. All of us are a part of Luna. Bobby and I put many aspects of our significant others into her character, little personality traits and quirks. And then as far as the dad, Xiaofu, our producer, was a Chinese-American immigrant. His parents were divorced. His father was a very entrepreneurial guy who kind of supported Xiaofu in going his own way and charting his own path. Bobby, immigrant mother who raised him by herself and gave Bobby all these great opportunities to pursue his dreams. And then I had not only supportive parents, but a very supportive grandfather. My mom's dad was a creative person. He was a singer and a painter. And at a young age, he kind of identified for my parents, like, he's going to work at Disney someday. He said that to my mom when I was like 4 or 5 years old. And she didn't tell me that until after I got hired at Disney, because she didn't want to put that pressure on me. She didn't want to like influence the outcome by telling me that he said that and then set me up for disappointment if it didn't happen. After I did get hired at Disney, she kind of elaborated on, yeah, my dad always thought you were going to work there.
That's great. And I think that it's also like in the industry, you need to go all in, right? It's really something you need to pour. You cannot kind of do it. Otherwise, it's hard to get far. And if we have time for just one more question that I would like to squeeze in from Paulina from Instagram. And she says, what was the hardest thing about translating the concept art into the animation phase?
That's a great question. Well, we knew we wanted it to look like a moving illustration. And because of our limited scope, we had to be very specific about how we used CG to look like Bobby's art. Bobby has a very clean, very shape-based and precise style of production design. And there's aspects of that that are conducive to CG, but the quality of execution in CG and the modeling, the rigging, the animation, and the lighting has to be very high and very precise to live up to Bobby's art. And so we were deconstructing everything every step of the way, in the modeling, the surfacing, the character animation, posing, the staging of the camera. It all had to be broken down in a way where we could kind of say, this is the layer that Bobby has in his Photoshop painting. What element of CG do we use to recreate that? Is this going to be like a rotoscoped shadow matte in comp, or is this going to be a cast shadow that we control and composite to look like this Photoshop element? The layers of the paintings were as much as possible recreated in the layers of the renders and the compositing to achieve the same look.
being a startup, a small studio with like a fraction of the money, at first we tried to do the traditional kind of like
just like traditional Pixar style CG.
It's expensive and it takes a lot of time.
It's more work to make something that looks bad, basically. Like unless you're operating at the level of like at least a medium or high tier studio like a Disney Pixar, it can be a lot of work to make something that doesn't look very good.
We did a few shots where it's just kind of traditional route. Takes a long time, Pietro, and it's a lot of money. When we went back to the simplified like look, we realized we can find a pipeline that kind of got through shots faster, and it was more easily art directed, and it kind of helped us stand out from like a lot of like photoreal like CG shorts. I think that was the biggest move for us, is that we can get it done doing a simpler style, and then we can be more creative about it.
We could integrate hand-drawn. It's like the characters are all polygon.
Chesworth would also do smoke effects in 2D. And that's the way that short was, of just kind of like Andrew Chesworth would be going in there and doing smoke effects, like in the candle, like burning out. And all
I really wanted to animate those candles.
It's like all hands on deck, man, which is the funnest thing in the world, man, right? In art school, 5 people are doing everything. That's what it kind of felt like. And so, like, because we had a simpler style, 2D-ish style, we can afford that, you know?
And we had to lean into our strengths too. There was a Pixar short called The Blue Umbrella, and I think the director was a technical director. The film is very technically impressive because the director is passionate about that way of doing things. And for us, we were animators, 2D designers. We had to kind of work with that. So we leaned into our strengths as designers and animators by making a film where those were the strengths, not the technical virtuosity of photoreal hair and effects, but rather just what can we bring as designers and animators that can really elevate it.
Beyond all that, it also made it special and unique. It has its own style that stands out.
It's funny because like the technology of it is actually lo-fi compared to like a film like
lo-fi.
If there's anything innovative about it, it's innovative in how it uses the basic elements of 2D and 3D animation. It's like it's not the tools, it's how you use them, and that was really encouraging because a lot of people were like, how did you do that? I mean, we're like, I don't know, with like the most basic tools that Photoshop and Maya have to offer, really.
Well, that's encouraging and makes me think about some of the projects I'm working on.
When we were surfacing the characters, putting the kind of color grades on the head and the neck and the eyes, we wanted to make sure the characters looked good even in a play blast with just like completely flat lighting, because then we're like, if it looks good in the play blast, once we color grade it and add like composite effects, it'll look that much better.
Anyone that's kind of making a short film, the 2 things I would encourage you to like think about is just trying to be as concise as possible with the storytelling. Be very clear in what you want to say, because I think you have to consider the audience, and whether it's a film festival or kind of online audience, attention span is only so limited. So if you can get in and say what you want to say powerfully and impactfully early on, and then kind of leave them wanting more at 7 minutes, dude, that'd be amazing.
Always leave people wanting more. Screen your story reel for regular people who are not creatives. Like we all brought in our significant others and some friends and screened a rough cut of our animatic, and the reactions were honestly a little mixed. And we had to change some things about the pacing, about the way some moments played, taking some things out that were not needed. Our CG supervisor's girlfriend made the suggestion that I think she should cut her hair when she picks herself back up to engage with her dream again. A decision that I think could only have come from like an unbiased female viewer, because you know we're men. We don't think about our hair the same way that women do. Not all men, anyway. Anything you can get from an honest reaction will make your story better if you find a way to implement it. And I think the worst thing you can do as a director is show your film or your work in progress to somebody, receive criticism because somebody didn't like it or something wasn't clear to them, and then you're like, no audience, I'm not wrong, you're wrong. And they're like, oh, watch me not buy a ticket for your film, watch me click away on YouTube. I think you have to trust that even if the audience can't properly diagnose, they can identify, right? They can identify that something's wrong, that something's not working, or that something's not good or clear. And it's up to you as the filmmaker to kind of take their feedback and implement it. But the identification of a problem is 99.9% of the time correct. And so when you receive that criticism, it's an opportunity to make your film better, not a criticism of you as a person. Or part of the process, like writing is rewriting, filmmaking is editing. And you're not going to hit it right the first time. Like the best film you've ever seen was probably worked on endlessly to get to that point, to the point that it seems easy and like, of course it ended up this way, but it's a long journey to get to something that seems obvious.
Thank you so much for sharing that, because that is it's super important. And especially I think thinking about when you're starting out, you want to express yourself. You got about 40 million views on YouTube, and that's a great way to share with the world. And for me, it's perfect. It's really, really an amazing short. I want to thank you so much for staying here to a little longer, for sharing your time, your knowledge. This has been fantastic. I do think it's a mini masterclass on how to write a short film. It was an honor for me to chat with you.
Thank you so much, Pietro. The honor was ours.
We talked about creating a character you can empathize with. Someone who, as Andrew Stanton would put it, makes me care. Watch this video to learn how Disney legendary director John Musker makes you care about his characters. I am Pietro, this is Write for Animation, and I'll see you there.